We will now have our Dharma talk given by Reverend Henry Adams.
Namam Davits, 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 Namam Davits. Namam Davits. Namam Davits. Please join me in Gasho. Gasho onegaishimasu. The cloud of light is unhindered like open sky. There is nothing that impedes it. Every being is nurtured by this light. So take refuge in Amida, the one beyond conception. Koun muge nyokoku issai no uge ni sawari nashi. Kotaku kamuranu monozo naki. Nanjigi o kimyo seo. Namam Davits, Namam Davits, Namam Davits, Namam Davits, Namam Davits. Good morning, everyone. Ohayou gozaimasu. Happy Father's Day to the fathers who are joining us here today. Thank you for taking time to be with us here today, both in person and for those who are joining us via Zoom. For this occasion, I find myself reflecting upon both my own father and my experience as a father myself. And I think back to these teachings of the Buddha and these words I shared at the beginning of my talk, which talks about, it says, the cloud of light is unhindered like open sky. And this light represents the Buddha's wisdom, and it says there's nothing that impedes it, and every being is nurtured by this light. And so take refuge in Amida, the one beyond conception. And so, I think oftentimes on this occasion, we think about our own fathers, but and we can also think about other family members, other friends, other people who have nurtured us with wisdom in our lives, and the great wisdom that we receive from the Buddha. I, again, reflect upon my own father, the ways in which he nurtured me, the ways in which I try to nurture my own children, and recognize the many ways in which I find myself coming up short. I remember an occasion when I was about the age of my own son, who just finished 5th grade and is going into, he'll be starting 6th grade in the fall. And when I was in 6th grade, around this age of 11 years old, my father and I took a trip. We went to visit Civil War battlefields on the East Coast of the United States. And I remember my dad, when he told me about this trip, he says, "Okay, Henry, we're gonna take a trip, just you and me, a dad and lad vacation." He was always talking about doing dad and lad activities. We're gonna take a dad and lad vacation. I was like, "Oh, where are we gonna go? We're gonna go to Disney World, are we gonna go, or we're gonna go to, Chicago?" He says, "We're gonna go to visit Civil War battlefields." And I thought, okay. My father was, a passionate student of the history of the American Civil War, and I always wondered what was it that intrigued him about that so much. And so we went on this trip. We flew into Washington, D.C. We visited some of the Civil War memorials there around the nation's capital, and then we drove into the other areas in those border states, Pennsylvania and so forth, where many of the important battles of the Civil War had been fought. And my father, I think in order to sort of instill in me fond memories of this trip, he let me pick almost every restaurant where we ate. So we ate at Pizza Hut, we ate at Arby's, we ate at McDonald's. It was like McDonald's for breakfast, Arby's for lunch, Pizza Hut for dinner. Lots of fast food. And he and I enjoy fast food. And so we had that bonding experience, but also going to visit these places. And these Civil War battlefields are, they're like national museums and national parks, many of them. And you go in and you visit these battlefields, and they're beautiful. We went in the springtime. The springtime in that mid-Atlantic coast is just beautiful, beautiful, lush green. It was still brown at that time in Minnesota, I remember. And then because it doesn't start getting green until much later in the spring. But I remember just the lush greenness, the freshness of the air, and how peaceful the parks were, how peaceful they were. And then we would go into the museums and we would see paintings and artifacts from that time. We would see paintings of battle scenes, smoke everywhere, people shooting each other with muskets and attacking one another with swords. We would see uniforms that the soldiers wore at the time, many of which bore the marks of battle. And there was this contrast between the peace that we were seeing there and the tremendous the violence of the war that had been fought. And I realized during that trip that this was something that my father wanted me to understand, that this nation that we live in, that this world that we live in, this peace that we enjoy, that behind that there has been conflict, and there continues to be conflict. My father, of course, grew up in the 1950s in Florida, and he said that he remembered as a child there would still be some very, very elderly Civil War veterans were still kind of around in his childhood, but he himself had no living memory of that time. But growing up in Florida in the 50s, it was very different than what I thought of as Florida. We took a family vacation to Florida once, and growing up in Minnesota, Florida is like a wintertime vacation destination. You go to Disney World, right? You go to Busch Gardens. You go to enjoy warm weather and fun activities. But he said, when I was growing up in Florida, it was Jim Crow South. It was segregation was severe, and my father was a poor white boy, and they lived adjacent to African American Black communities, but not in community with people, with the Black families who were their neighbors. And he would describe the tensions that were embedded in the society, the ways in which kids would get chased out of each other's neighborhoods if they ventured down the wrong street. And so he grew up with this real sense of the ongoing injustice, segregation, divisions in society. And in his heart, I believe he had awakened a wish for peace, a wish for reconciliation, for a world of harmony. And visiting those Civil War battlefields, there was a sense that wish had been held, and there were people who were willing to give their lives to undergo great and fearful battles in order to bring to light, to create a world of equality, a world of freedom for all, the ideals upon which this country were based, but also a deep understanding that we have yet to realize those ideals. And so as I, reflect upon this experience and this day, today, June 19th, which is the Juneteenth holiday, the day in which we observe the formal end of slavery in the United States. June 19th, 1865 was the year in which General Gordon Granger of the Union Army, having entered into Texas, the most sort of remote state in the Confederacy at the end of the Civil War. So the Civil War ended in April 1865, and it took 2 months for the Union Army to then progress into all areas of the Confederacy, and until the Union Army arrived, slavery continued. And so it was only with the arrival of General Granger, and he issued a proclamation and said, all of the enslaved people in this state of Texas are free. The Union Army has now taken control of Texas, and so these people are free. Now, they were part of the United States, and when Abraham Lincoln had issued the Emancipation Proclamation long before, they were formally free, but the freedom was not realized until that June 19th. And so we cherish this day as a day in which that aspiration for freedom and equality is realized and affirmed. This aspiration for freedom and equality for all beings, this is at the heart of the Buddha's teachings. This is the Buddha's wish for all of us. He nurtures, we're told in these words of Shinran Shonin, that the light of the Buddha nurtures every being. So every person viewed in the light of the Buddha, in that light, equal, beautiful, precious, just as they are. And so as we reflect upon this world that we live in, we see that the world of the Buddha has not been realized in our world. And to me, it seems very difficult. Perhaps, hard to imagine that world of enlightenment can be realized when there are people like me who are filled with greed, anger, and delusion. I think not about others, but of how these things still dwell in myself. My father, he shared this insight with me. He shared how growing up, he was conditioned by his society to think that people were separate, that people were unequal. We call this a delusion. This is one of the three base passions. And from this then, greed, protect my neighborhood, protect my area. Anger, somebody comes in there, I get mad at them, I throw some rocks at them. And this is the world we live in, and sadly, this is not something that was in 1865 or 1958. This is something that happens today, happens continual, this aggression and violence in this world that we live in. And yet the Buddha says, do not despair of this world that we live in, but direct your mind to the world of awakening. Direct your mind to the world of peace and bliss. Have that as your clear destination. And then doing so, we're able to live with remarkable courage and clarity in the face of tremendous challenges. We live in this world with what we call the heart of the Bodhisattva, the heart which aspires not just to realize liberation for oneself, but liberation for all beings. And so we continue to live in this world of suffering with the understanding that we direct our lives to the world of awakening, to the ideals of a kind of wisdom that nurtures all beings. And we receive that wisdom in these words, Namo Amida Butsu. And we receive the equality and the freedom of the Dharma. The equality of the Dharma is the equality in which everyone, every living being, is precious and cherished, just as they are. The freedom of the Dharma is not just freedom to do what I want in the way that I want to do it. It's freedom from selfishness, freedom from attachments to me and mine. It's freedom to be able to do things that are difficult and challenging for the benefit of others, even when it would seem that one does not receive that benefit for themselves. But we do act wholly in this spirit of deep, deep generosity. And it's not possible coming from that mind of greed, anger, and ignorance, but it is possible when we receive the Buddha mind in the Nembutsu, in these words, Namo Amida Butsu. So on this occasion of Father's Day and Juneteenth, for me, in my heart, there's a kind of connection with the experiences of my own family that have ultimately guided me here to the Dharma, in which I can appreciate the Buddha's wish for all beings to live with freedom, to enjoy equality in the true sense of being precious, just as we are, and cherished. And so I thank you very much for this opportunity to come together on this very special day and to take refuge in these words of wisdom from the Buddha. So we'll conclude once again with these words of Shinran Shonin. Please join me in Gassho. The cloud of light is unhindered like open sky. There is nothing that impedes it. Every being is nurtured by this light. So take refuge in Amida, the one beyond conception. Koun muge nyokoku, issai no uge ni sawari nashi, ko taku kamuranu monozo naki, nanjigi o kimyo seo. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namam Dabutsu. Namam Dabutsu. Namam Dabutsu. Namam Dabutsu. Namam Dabutsu.
Thank you, Reverend Adams. We enjoyed your reflections on your experiences and your father's experiences on this Father's Day, and your historical references to June 19th. Thank you.